Well, thank you very much, Tom. Governor Raimondo and my colleagues in government, this has been an extraordinarily impressive conference to me, and I've been delighted to be able to participate. I'm particularly delighted to be able to have the opportunity to welcome and introduce my friend, my classmate from West Point, Frank Kendall. Frank is the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. He has been doing a superb job, somebody that represents all the values that we hold dear: integrity, intelligence, and selfless service. And he personifies those values for me and for so many others. He, after outpacing me at West Point, went on to receive a master's in aerospace engineering from Caltech, a master's of business administration from C.W. Post, and then a law degree from Georgetown University. I can't think of anyone more qualified than Frank to hold the position of responsibility that he has. He has been a consultant to industry. He's been a consultant to nonprofit organizations, the Department of Defense. He's a former member of the Army Science Board, the Defense Intelligence Agency Science and Technology Advisory Board. But for me, what I think forms the core of his purpose and his boundless energy is the service he spent 10 years on active duty leading soldiers of the United States Army, which to me is the greatest privilege one can have. And Frank did that. Then he went back to West Point, he taught some engineering, and then embarked on his career, not only his educational career, but his career as a defense specialist and a public servant. So without any further ado, let me call up a friend, a colleague, classmate, Frank Kendall. Mr. Secretary, please.
This has become a yearly tradition for me by now. This is my third time up here. Senator Reid, thank you very much for the introduction. Governor Raimondo, great to be here with you. Great to be here with all of my colleagues from government and from industry. This has become, I think, a fairly important event in the region, and it's a great opportunity for me to get a little bit of time, at least hands-on, with some of the large and small businesses that support our warfighters, and I always thoroughly enjoy that. Jack mentioned my background. I'm really an engineer fundamentally, although I've been a soldier, I've been a businessman, and I am a lawyer. The lawyer was sort of an afterthought late in my life. But I'm really fundamentally an engineer, so I love to have a chance to get hands-on a little bit and talk about some of the technologies that I see emerging. There's a major push in the department right now for innovation, which is very well founded, and I'll talk a little bit about why we're doing that. But I will amplify on some things I've said here in the past. When I was here the first time, 2 years ago, I talked about better buying power, the set of initiatives that Secretary Carter, when he was Undersecretary, and I initially started with better buying power, what we now call 1.0, to improve the performance of our acquisition system, to get more for our money. 2 years ago, I announced the third version of better buying power, and better buying power initiatives have always been about continuous improvement over time, and we've changed the emphasis from initially cost control and cost consciousness to building professionalism in the second, and critical thinking in the second iteration, to innovation and technical excellence in the third one, which I rolled out basically informally here 2 years ago. A year ago, I talked about innovation, and I talked about what the ingredients were for innovation. Some of them, I think, were represented by the remarks that the governor made a few moments ago. But at the end of that, I talked about the importance of capital. And if you're going to innovate and create a new product and put it in the market, you need capital, resources. And as much as we're talking about innovation today in the department, as much as we're doing about it, which is all good, I'm a little bit concerned that it is obscuring the fact that our fundamental problem at the end of the day is the adequacy of the resources that are received. I'm going to look forward, as I would prefer to do, and talk about the next administration coming in and some of the challenges that that administration will face. But I think at the top of that list is the need to get adequate resources for the Department of Defense. Sequestration, which we all remember from a few years ago, which we've managed to avoid for the last few years through a negotiation process, comes back again next year. That's one of the things that the new administration and the new Congress are going to have to confront. Here, let me talk a little bit about what we've been trying to do and the challenges that have motivated us within the department. Secretary Carter came back to the department just about a year and a half ago, and the first thing he had to do was put out his first budget, which he basically inherited from people that had been there earlier. This last budget, though, that he put out last spring is his budget. And it's important because he shifted the department fundamentally from the budgets of about 20, 25 years. When the Cold War ended, and I was in the department then, we went from having a very threat-based approach to planning. The threat was the Soviet Union, and that was the entity that we worried about, and we designed our forces around fundamentally, to a more general capability-based approach to building budgets. And for a very long time, we talked about two regional contingencies. We didn't always specify that we would have to deal with and possibly simultaneously have to deal with, and built our plans around that. So it was a capability-based approach. And we did that for quite a long time. After 9/11, we got very involved in counterterrorism, counterinsurgency campaigns. And we had supplementals, other contingency operations funds we used to do that. But the base budget was still built around sort of general contingencies that might occur. What Secretary Carter did last year for the FY17 budget is talk about and have us plan around 5 very specific threats. Those threats are China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and violent extremist groups like ISIL. So that's a threat-driven budget, and we're back to that, and I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. In the 25-odd years since the Cold War ended, a number of things have happened, but one of those things is that some of the countries which we didn't really worry about too much after the end of the Cold War have embarked on significant modernization programs and are doing so in a way which threatens the United States and its allies. I'm not suggesting that we're about to get into another great power war, and I hope we don't even get into an arms race. But on the other hand, we cannot be complacent about our capabilities. So we are shifting back towards a focus on what I would call higher-end threats. And that's what Secretary Carter did in the FY17 budget, as well as deal with all those other problems. I've been speaking for years now about concerns about technological superiority and the erosion of our technological superiority. I came back to government after being away for 15 years. I started looking at the intelligence on what China in particular, but also Russia was building. It became very clear to me that they're building, and China in particular again, is building a suite of capabilities designed to defeat the power projection capability of the United States. There's no other reason for them to be building the things that they're building. And they're doing a very good job of it. We need to respond to that. And there are a number of things the department is doing. But again, I'll be redundant about this. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about resources and the adequacy of our investments. Now, I mentioned the list of 5 things that Secretary Carter focused on in his budget. One thing to notice about those 5 is that they're all very different. They're not one problem 5 times. They're 5 different problems. You have a very air and sea oriented theater in the Western Pacific. You have a land and air oriented theater in Europe. Both of those have great time and distance problems associated with them in terms of getting forces there in case you need them. You have a very unique problem with North Korea, with a very armed country right on the border with a close ally. You have a problem with Iran, and we're seeing tension increasing there. And we're trying to work our way through that relationship in a way that's positive, but it's still a concern in the region for peace and stability in a very important region to us. And then, of course, you have the campaign against ISIL, which is ISIL or the Taliban or other extremist groups like that, which are still ongoing and will be ongoing for some time. So that's very much a right-now operational problem. It's not a future possible problem. It's a right-now problem. Meanwhile, we're trying to preserve peace and stability around the world. And we have large forces deployed all the time. So we're trying to do a lot all at once. And we're trying to do it now and remain and keep our forces so that they can do it tomorrow and the day after that, far into the future. And it is that modernization part of what we do that I am most concerned about because of where I sit in the Pentagon and what my responsibilities are. So back up a year to when I was here and I talked about innovation and Better Buying Power 3.0. I'm going to give you kind of a report on what we've done there. We've taken a lot of steps. We rolled out the implementation plan for Better Buying Power 3.0 over a year ago, and we've been working our way through that. We're basically about done. Policies are in place. The activities that we wanted to start have been started, and now it's going to be largely about following up and continuing them. I threaten my staff at times with a better buying power 4.0, recognizing that there's an election coming up, and I might not be around here to do it. I spared them that pain. But if I were to do one, it would be focused on sustainment, one of the areas that I think we can reap some more benefits from the point of view of more efficient use of resources in particular. And I've asked my people who are responsible for that to start thinking about what we might put into such an initiative. So stay tuned. Maybe I'll be back next year to talk about better buying power 4.0. Who knows? But let me tell you some of the things that we're doing. And I think we're well along into implementing these. And again, the theme is innovation and technical excellence. One of the first things we did was something called a long-range R&D planning program. And this was something that was mirrored on a very similar activity in the 70s that led to what we now call the second offset strategy. You know, Bob Work came into the Pentagon as the Deputy Secretary and very quickly started talking about the need for a third offset strategy. The first one being tactical nuclear weapons, when the U.S. had a monopoly on tactical nuclear weapons in the 50s. The second one being built around precision munitions and other technologies like stealth, network systems, and wide area surveillance systems that we demonstrated very dramatically in the first Gulf War in 1991, and which we have relied upon ever since. It's that system that people have been working on determining ways to defeat. And the technologies that we introduced are proliferated. So we no longer have the dominance we had. Just like in the 50s, we lost our dominance because of nuclear weapons, because the Soviet Union also fielded tactical nuclear weapons. So we need to be thinking about what to do next. The long-range R&D planning activity was designed to do that. It was led by Steve Welby, my Assistant Secretary for Research and Engineering. He'll be here tomorrow, speak to you tomorrow. Out of that study effort, there came a number of demonstrations that we have managed to put into the budget. You know, if there's one thing that we have done because of Secretary Carter's interest in the high-end threat and making sure we do enough about that, it is to get into our budget a number of tech demonstration or risk reduction or experimental prototypes. And many of them came out of the study that I just mentioned. That's a good thing, but it's only part of solving the problem, and I'll get to that. I'll say more about that in a minute. We're moving more towards accelerating the bringing in of commercial technologies to the department. It's a fact that commercial technologies are moving in some areas much more quickly than they are for government-sponsored technologies. And it's a fact that the investments in those technologies are much greater than the investments that we can make. Again, contrast that with the earlier eras, both in the 50s and the 70s. So we're making some efforts to reach out to commercial firms. You've probably heard of Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX. We have established a DIUX office on the West Coast. We've opened one now on the East Coast up near Boston, and we may expand that. But the idea there is to accelerate the movement of technology out of the commercial world into the defense products, and also to bring some of the intellectual capital that's available outside the Defense Department, people who do not normally work on national security, and get them working on national security problems. So that outreach is another one of our initiatives. We want to improve the return on investment in our government laboratories. We have about $30 billion a year that flows to our government laboratories. And again, Steve Welby has led an effort within his office to expand on their efficiencies, to find ways to get more out of that, focus it more on the things that matter the most, and get rid of as much overhead as we can so we can put more money into actually getting products into the hands of our warfighter. We've worked with industry on improving the productivity of the corporately funded independent research and development. And what we're trying to do there fundamentally is improve the communications between industry and government. So we're asking industry to, as a condition for allowability, for reimbursement for those investments, to inform the government of what they're doing, and then report on the results after they finish a project. It's a very light touch way of getting more engagement between industry and government on internal or independent R&D. We're just putting that in place, and hopefully that will lead to some improvements there as well. We want to increase the use of prototyping and experimentation. This is a way for operators to get experience with new ideas that can change their operational concepts, because innovation in operational concepts is at least as important, maybe more important, than innovation in technology. So we're increasing the use of prototyping. We're emphasizing tech refresh and insertion in our program planning so that there's a home for that technology. And once the technology is matured, if there isn't any place to embed it into a weapon system or into a program at a higher level, it's going to sit on the shelf and going to wait for another generation. So ensuring that we have a thought-out plan for tech insertion is now a normal part of our planning for all of our programs. Consistent with that, we're asking people to do modular open systems. Now, we had an issue with the House this year, where the House Armed Services Committee wanted to mandate that all designs had to be modular open systems and had to have open architectures. That's not always possible. As an engineer, I can tell you that as much as you might like to do that, it isn't always possible in a given design to completely have a modular design. So we asked for, and we were able to persuade the House to give us some relief on that. So the FY17 bill that came out of the House did not dictate that, but it moves us further in that direction, which we support. It is a trade-off of cost and other things often to ensure the design has those features. But that gives you an opportunity to introduce competition, which saves money. It also gives you an opportunity to insert technology over the life of our programs. And we keep our major programs 30, 40 years on the average. So it's obviously some of the technologies are moving at a much higher rate than that. We're working closer with industry than we have. This is something that in my earlier parts of my career we did routinely. It fell out of favor for some reason. But we're sharing our draft requirements with industry early so we can get reaction to them. And also so that industry can start working on technologies that will help us meet those requirements on their own to put themselves in a better competitive position, but also to get us better products. And we're also engaging industry on our concept definition work, the work that goes into forming our requirements. This is a return to something that was routine during the Cold War, and somehow, again, it fell out of favor. And the government is not the only place with ideas, certainly, and we should reach out to industry, get their ideas, integrate them, and then industry has a chance to shape requirements. It may be in their interest to do that, but it certainly may be in the interest of the department to do that as well. So working more closely there. Along the same lines, we're defining for industry now what best value means in monetary terms. Most of our procurements traditionally, going way back, have been around the set of requirements for which we say there's a threshold level that the product you're going to sell us must meet. There's an objective level which we'd like to have that is higher than that. But what happens in source selections and competitions is that people just bid to the threshold. They bid to the lowest denominator, the minimum acceptable, even if they could give us a much better value to us product at a slightly higher price, because they know that cost is going to be a major discriminator in source selections. So what we've started doing, and this is working extremely well, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, is we're telling industry that they will get credit in source selection for higher performance. They will get effectively a reduction in their price associated for evaluation purposes associated with that higher performance. So industry can make an informed judgment about whether to offer us that higher performance or not. We've had great success with this, and we're going to continue to do it as a matter of practice. It gives industry an objective way to understand what the return for it is on offering us a better product. And it gets us a better product at the end of the day. And we've had several competitions where we have not gone with the lowest price, lowest capability, the antithesis of the LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable. We've gone with a much better performing, but at an increased price that we're perfectly willing to pay. It's within our affordability constraints, but it gives us more value than the delta in cost to us in terms of value that we get. Global outreach for technology is the next item I'll mention. We are working closely with international partners around the world. Technology has globalized, it has spread. That's true in the military as well as the commercial area. We can't afford to do new designs for everything that we buy, and we're reaching out to others. The Marine Corps recently has reached out internationally for its amphibious assault vehicle. Is a good example of that. And I think we need to do more of that. There need to be areas where we stretch for a generation ahead of capability than anybody else, and we put a lot of money into getting that. There are other areas where we should take current state-of-the-art, where they're of lesser importance operationally, and we can accept something that's not the very, very best possible product. And often our international partners have those kinds of product to offer us. We're increasing the use of small businesses, and we for the third year in a row, I believe, I'm a little ahead of myself on this, but the department, I believe, will meet its small business goals, its targets for direct contracting with small businesses. That is unprecedented. It was unprecedented to do it once when we did it 2 years ago, and we've continued that trend. We're also doing very well in some of the subcategories. But we recognize this administration has been incredibly supportive of small businesses, and it is paying off for the department. They're a source of enormous innovation. It recognizes how our universities have gone in a large way. I was at Caltech recently. I was at MIT not too long ago, and it is really quite a change for me to see how professors, when they tell you what kind of work they're doing, brag about the number of startups that have come out of their work. And students are consciously thinking about how they're going to take the research that they do and convert it into a product. We need to take advantage of that. I'm trying to strengthen our organic engineering capabilities. They have atrophied in some areas, and some other areas they remain strong. But I think that having good organic engineering capability within the government is critical for our success. We can't work well with industry without that. One of my initiatives was to start something called, I'm going to use the phrase from Lockheed, Skunk Works types programs. Phantom Works does something very similar with Boeing. The idea that you have small teams with well-established and firm requirements that work cooperatively on a program in a very low bureaucracy kind of a setting to get the job done. And those arrangements, those business arrangements come from the trust that can exist between the industry team and the government team that work together as one. And when looking at the history of this, it became clear to me that the reason we could have trust in those sorts of arrangements was because the government people and the industry people both fully understood what the job was and how to do it, and there was great professionalism on both sides, great technical expertise on both sides, and no nonsense was going on. That I think is the right kind of relationship. We have a couple of pilot projects going on in that regard, and they're doing very, very well. I'm pushing for, within our own workforce, particularly for program managers for development programs, that people have a strong technical background. I don't believe you can supervise engineering unless you are an engineer and understand engineering. I wouldn't ask someone who's not a physician or an attorney to supervise other physicians or attorneys doing their work unless they had that background. I think the same applies here. And I also want to make sure that the operational side of the Department of Defense understands the importance of that kind of a background and builds it up within this workforce. Some of our services do better than others, but all of them can improve. And in general, this is Better Buying Power 2.0, building the professionalism of our workforce is a core responsibility. The ability to do risk management is very much a part of that. I'm in an interesting situation where the Congress tends to expect that we will have perfectly executing programs that will come in exactly on cost and schedule and give us exactly the performance that we desire, and that we take more risk and be more innovative and go faster. There is a tension between those two things, believe it or not. But knowing how to manage risk, knowing how to get as efficient a program as you can, and being proactive about that is a fundamental responsibility. But again, it goes back to having the expertise to understand the risk and the plan accordingly. And then as a longer-term initiative, we're supporting science, technology, engineering, and math education. And I've been to, I think, 5 or 6 events now this year where the department's very engaged. And I really applaud what the state is doing here to build skill sets, whether it's the technical work in cyber or welding or something else, or it's more advanced work in engineering and science. It all benefits our country. It all benefits our national security posture. Very worth supporting. Let me go back to some other things now. Better Buying Power is moving forward, is the bottom line there. We're well underway at implementing all of those things that I talked about. Let me talk about some other things that we're doing. I mentioned Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. That organization is basically a conduit to bring companies into the department more quickly than they might come otherwise. They're making some small, I'll call them investments, but they're paying for some R&D work. We're not taking any equity, we're just paying for R&D work that will help companies move forward and position them to come into the department, and then making marriages with different parts of the department that can use that technology, and we're having some pretty good success with that. Well, a couple of years ago, Secretary Carter set up something called the Strategic Capabilities Office. This is an office run by a man named Will Roper, whose purpose in life is to take the things we already have and find creative and interesting new ways to use them technically and operationally. And Will has a number of demonstrations, and we've mentioned some of them are classified, but we've mentioned some like the Arsenal plane, for example, as ideas where we can take existing weapons and existing aircraft, marry them together, and put them into an entirely new concept operationally. We also have brought on board people called the Defense Digital Service. This is interesting. It's another attempt to bring people with a commercial background into the department to help us with our problems. The Defense Digital Service is a group of software developer people. They're experts. They're at the top of their profession who have been very successful in their commercial careers. They're what we call post-economic. That means they're rich enough they don't need to worry about money. And they want to give back to the country that gave them the opportunity to go build businesses and do that, or be part of businesses that did that. And so they're helping us with the nuts and bolts of software development, one of the areas in which traditionally the department has a really big problem. So does the commercial world, by the way. But doing complex software programs and bring them in. Interestingly, I've had them working on 2 or 3 different programs for me. It's been very successful, but they are actually impressed with the capabilities in some of our defense contractors to develop software. So that was, in a way, reassuring for me, and I'm glad to see that. But their hands-on approach is bringing a lot of expertise to the table that we wouldn't have otherwise. Secretary Carter's created something called the Defense Innovation Board, and it's again, bringing in people largely from the commercial world to look at not just technologies and how we apply technologies, but how we do business, how we're organized, how we do human resources management, how we manage our resources internally as a business, basically as an enterprise. And that group is working now. They're looking in particular at the moment at our S&T enterprise, science and technology enterprise, and how we're operating there. So it's supporting many of the things we're doing under better buying power. Let me look ahead to the next year or so and beyond into the next administration. We're doing a lot about innovation, and I'm going to say it for the 3rd time, I think. I don't think at the end of the day, lack of innovation is our core problem. I can look around, and I saw a lot of that as I walked through the displays this morning. I talked to some people about things that they had demonstrated that weren't getting into the pipeline and being fielded. I think at the end of the day, our problem is much more about resources than it is about innovation. It's good that we're doing all these things about innovation. It's good that we're doing the demonstrations. I refer to the demonstrations that we put in the budget last year as buying options. Having done the demonstration, you will have bought an option for starting engineering and manufacturing development for production. You'll have removed the risk. You'll have demonstrated the proof of principle basis, kind of technology that you're interested in, and its operational importance or relevance or value. But you haven't done the hard work to get a product ready for fielding. That lies beyond, and it's much more expensive to do that. So while we have all those demonstrations in the budget, we do not today in the 5-year plan have the follow-on work to make them into products to give to our warfighters. And I'm afraid we may be, to some extent, not entirely clear about that. People may not appreciate the fact that when we talk about the Arsenal Plane program, it is an Arsenal Plane demonstration. It is not a program, not the same thing. So resources, again, at the end of the day, are what we're going to have to worry about. The next administration will confront sequestration right away, going into FY18 as soon as they come out. It's going to color their debates about the budget. It's to remind you all, sequestration was intended to be unacceptable. The purpose of sequestration was to be so unacceptable that no one would ever do it. And we thought at the time that we made it very unacceptable and that wouldn't happen, which is why in FY13 we went barreling along spending money, assuming it wouldn't happen until it did. And then we had a crisis in the department. We had to furlough everybody. We had to stop flying. We had the death of 1,000 cuts. We're still digging our way out of the hole of FY13 on readiness. The other priority in Secretary Carter's budget, besides the five threats, and specifically the higher-end threats, if you will, was recovering readiness. Because we're still trying to recover readiness that we sacrificed because we had no choice in FY13. And that will be 2 or 3 more years before we get there, assuming we get the budgets that we currently predict. With the sequestration level budgets, we won't even come close. We're just going to dig the hole deeper again. So that will be confronted as well. So that's all competing. I mentioned the 5 problems that Secretary Carter talked about. I mentioned the need for readiness. There's a very strong demand for forward presence. We are conducting operations supporting the Afghan military in Afghanistan. We're conducting operations in Iraq and Syria, and we're having to deal with terrorist groups in other parts of the globe. So there are a lot of right now demands for the department. Nobody wants to shrink the force anymore. We've done a lot of that already. There's a lot of resistance to going any deeper in terms of force structure cuts. So that leaves modernization and procurement. So in addition to shortfalls in modernization, when you compare what we're building to what others are doing that are designed to defeat us, there's also the problem of aging equipment. And if you think back 25 years, the equipment that we used in the first Gulf War in 1991 is basically the equipment that we have. It's been upgraded. A lot of those systems have been upgraded significantly, but they are still largely what the force is equipped with today. And it's getting older. It's getting harder to maintain. The F-18 fleet, I think all the Navy aviators in the room know this, is about 50% non-operational right now. a lot of it for depot level work. And we're trying to dig our way out of that. That's part of the hole that we created for ourselves. So all those things compete in the budget. And at the end of the day, again, our problem is resources. Without any political commentary whatsoever, whoever wins the election, whoever comes back in Congress is going to have to confront this, and the department's going to have to confront this is their fundamental concern. I have enormous confidence in our people. They will do the best that they can with what they have. I was asked the other day when I was giving a presentation like this about how I rate the Department of Defense in acquisition. I actually give us either a B+ or maybe an A-. We're like the football team that always wins the Super Bowl, but because we throw a pass for an interception occasionally, throw an interception or have a fumble occasionally, we get an enormous amount of criticism, it seems. People should remember that we do keep winning the Super Bowl. That's a pretty big deal. We've had the best military on the planet for a very long time. Unprecedented, really, particularly with the pace of technological change. Let me make a comment about that. 25 years is a long time, particularly in the modern era. When you look at technological change. But if you think about the history of warfare, and you just go back to, say, the end of the Civil War and come forward in about 25-year increments and think about what technology was dominant in the battlefield, it does change every few years, every couple of decades or so. And people have to re-equip because of that. What are some technologies that I think are going to make a big difference? A lot of them are on display here. We're talking a lot about autonomy. We're talking a lot about artificial intelligence. We're also talking about the ability to operate from greater range, and we're talking about manufacturing technologies that make what we call quantity at cost much more affordable. Another emerging field in technology where change is starting to happen exponentially is in biological engineering, biologically based engineered projects. There are a variety of those. I gave a speech to an Army group a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about autonomy and artificial intelligence and what that was going to mean on the battlefield. And I believe that those things are coming at a pace that probably exceeds what we would currently expect. About 20 years ago, I was working on a program for the Army called Future Combat System. We were looking at a design for a manned-portable unmanned vehicle, air vehicle, that was a ducted fan. It was about this big around. It had an engine that sounded like a lawnmower, and it was going to cost $200,000. I can buy a very similar vehicle in terms of its performance today online for about $1,000. That's a remarkable change. If you look at what the Russians are doing in the Ukraine with a combination of electronic warfare capabilities and unmanned aerial vehicles like the one I just described and precision fires, if you get on your phone, you're going to be a target in a few seconds. It is a fundamental change. If you look at what's happening with commercial vehicles for unmanned navigation, the fact that Tesla had an accident is unfortunate, but it tells you something about where we are. With Google and Amazon and others, there are trucks out there on the highways now delivering things that don't have drivers in them. That's coming to the battlefield. Artificial intelligence is not one thing. It's actually a number of different things. But in terms of pattern recognition and perception and decision-making speed, it is getting better and better. And you see reports of this that suggest this periodically in the press. Those things are all going to change what dominates on future battlefields. Precision munitions that we have had a near monopoly on for a long time, we no longer have that monopoly. So that is no longer going to be what we're going to be able to rely on unilaterally. When I was speaking to the Army, I made a comment about this, and I said that we may have an advantage or not in terms of man-machine interface and how human operators from the United States interact with machines and make them more or less effective in how we work with them. I think there's some truth to that. Bob Work is fixed on that. I think he has a point, certainly. I don't know, though, that in many battlefield situations where that will actually lead to better results. I do know that the United States will behave in a way which is consistent with our values and is basically a moral way to behave. We will avoid collateral damage. We will be careful about the decisions we make. And we will keep people in the loop in order to ensure that good decisions are made so that people don't die unnecessarily. We work very, very hard in operations today to ensure that that happens. I cannot say the same necessarily about some of our potential adversaries. And I don't know if that means we will have an advantage or a disadvantage. I am afraid that it may mean that militarily we'll have a disadvantage. And I am not suggesting for a moment that we abandon our values. That is not my intent. Had a reporter report me that way after the other talks. I want to be clear about that. But I do think that this is coming, and that we may have to overcome what might actually be a disadvantage, and others are prepared to be more ruthless than we are. I think that this is inevitable. It is well underway. That transformation is occurring. The other thing that is very fundamental is that the things we have relied upon to project power are at risk now, in a way that they haven't been until now. And I'm talking about high-value assets like forward air bases that are only a few hundred miles from the threat. I'm talking about aircraft carriers and other capital ships that can be targeted by cruise and ballistic missiles from any range of platforms and detected by a wide range of means. I'm talking about our satellites in orbit, which are small in numbers and high in value. In general, we have a structure, a capital structure that we depend upon, which consists of a relatively small number of high-value assets. And people have been watching how we fight and how we project power, have figured all that out, and are designing things to defeat us. So we're in a very challenging world. We are challenged. I've made a comment in testimony before I think both of the Armed Services Committees that we are being challenged today in ways we have not been for decades. And we're going to have to respond to that. It's going to take innovation, certainly, but it's also going to take resources. On that happy note, I will stop and take a few questions. I am known for standing in front of groups for half an hour until somebody asks a question. There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for attending and your remarks. My question is about capacity. You talked a lot about the high-end threat, but those same adversaries have quite a bit of capacity. I was just wondering how we might address that and how your comment on international partnerships plays into that.
Good point. It plays very much into that. One of the advantages the United States has is that we're part of a community of nations with very common values and principles. Western Europe, certainly. I've been spending a lot of time with India, the largest democracy in the world. Together, we're the two largest democracies in the world. So we can, working with our allies, basically amplify our power substantially. That's true in terms of force structure. It's true in terms of the resources we can bring to bear on things like innovation and creating new products. And I think we need to be open to more of both of those things. We do a great many international exercises, and we're expanding those. We need to integrate our forces more effectively. And former Chief of Staff of the Chief of Naval Operations talked about the size of the U.S. fleet, but he talked about we could have a virtual fleet was much, much bigger than that by integrating our allies' fleets with ours. And I think that's absolutely true. And we look at the balance of the difficulties of moving armored forces, in particular to Europe, in the event of a crisis or increased tension. The degree to which we can rely on things that are already there, the forces are already there, and then supplement them with things that make the greatest difference in terms of additional capability, I think we need to think about very seriously and maybe rebalance accordingly. But anyway, that's something that I think will have to be debated as we go forward. But I think you made a really good point. When you look at the potential adversaries, the 5 people on that list, those 5 that I talked about do not have a lot of friends. They do not have a similar situation we do, so it's an asymmetrical advantage for us. Way in the back there. Jamie. The question was talk about the intelligence side of the equation. Obviously, good intelligence is very important to us. It's important strategically in the sense of understanding what kinds of things adversaries might be building. It's important operationally and tactically in terms of decision-making associated with operations. Again, we have invested very heavily in what I call permissive environment capability. I'm talking about UAVs, which have no real defensive capabilities at all and are not survivable against air defenses. We've bought a lot of them to prosecute the campaign against ISIL and the Taliban and al-Qaeda. We are buying some platforms that similarly are more designed for a permissive environment in smaller numbers for particularly the Air Force and the Navy. We have to think carefully about the survivability requirements on all of those things as part of our decision-making process, and I'm not sure we're giving that enough weight as we decide on our requirements. Our intelligence assets that are in orbit, can't say very much about this. It's a sensitive topic, but there we have a similar situation. Space is changing fundamentally. We talk about it being a contested environment. It is becoming a contested environment much more so than in the past. Both Russia and China are investing in a suite of anti-satellite capabilities designed to defeat our ability to see the battlefield, to gather intelligence, to communicate, and for position navigation and timing. So we do have a big problem there. The department has made the move to change its way it thinks about space strategically. It has not yet made the decisions about what to do about that, not all of them anyway. So one of the other things that I think the next administration is going to have to come to grips with is what do we replace some of our current capabilities with, which fit that description of very small number, very high value assets, of course, and in space, they're very easy to target. So what do we do about that? And there's quite a bit of debate about that. The other problem I did not mention, and I just thought about it, so let me do it now, is addition to all those other problems that the next administration will have, it has to confront the bill to recapitalize the strategic triad. Starting in about 21 and 22, that bill starts to get very big. And we've gone 20 or 30 years without spending money on major investments in any of the legs of the triad. And now we have to replace all of them. The bomber program is underway for the medium-range bomber in the Air Force, but the ICBM program is just getting started, and the Ohio Replacement Program in the Navy, while it's well into development, we haven't started production yet. And that's coming. And that's going to, when you add those up together, that's a bill that's on the order of $12 or $15 billion per year for the department that goes on for over 10 years. So, and we really have very little choice about that. So that problem is another one that the next administration is going to have to deal with.
Sir, my name is Joe Marino. The CNO has issued a loud and clear demand signal to our community to pick up the pace on the creation and implementation of revolutionary technologies. So it appears the processes are in place to address evolution. You mentioned tech insertion, but how do we actually get revolutionary technology aboard our platforms?
I think at the end it's going to still come back to how making very tough choices about resources. I can't remember who I was talking to this morning about some of the systems. There was just a demo here in the Newport area of some undersea capabilities, multi-domain capabilities that the Navy did. And a comment from the person I was talking to about the pace of the system of actually buying them and integrating them. And I don't know that there's anything inherent in the system that prevents us from doing that, other than the fact that we have to find the resources. The services have been asked by the deputy to create rapid capability offices. Navy's doing that. I spoke to the Army yesterday. They're doing it. We have an office like that in the Air Force. And basically, to me, these are program offices. And you put rapid in front of somebody's name, it doesn't necessarily mean they can go faster, but it means they're certainly going to try. What it takes us to feel the system is not driven that much by our processes. It's driven by how long it takes to do the job. So I have lived enough decades of acquisition to understand this, but a lot of people don't. We put a layer of bureaucracy on top of our biggest programs to make sure that they're executable programs, to make sure that they're managing risk reasonably, that they have adequate schedule, adequate money, that the requirements are going to be attainable, and that they're structured for success. So we have good business deals with industry that motivate industry properly. There's an overhead associated with that. That is not what takes our program so long. The F-35 did not take so long because of any of that stuff. It took so long because it's so hard to write the software, and that's what we've been doing. There was no break in the work because we were doing a review process on top of it. In general, we structure our programs so that the work flows from a risk reduction phase into a full-scale development phase and into production. We have a degree of concurrency, and there's judgment about that between development and startup production. But it's getting the work done that takes the time. Somebody was talking about what the Chinese are doing in all their modernization programs, and we took a hard look at that, and it takes their engineers about as long to develop a new product as it does ours. And so the timelines are comparable. So I think there's an illusion that there's some magic way we can go faster. There isn't. The way you go faster, two things you can do to go faster. First one is you start sooner. And the way you do that is you get money that allows you to start sooner. So I've asked the Congress for this. I've said, I could buy 2 years if you just let me start, give me some money that I can start a program without coming to you for permission. Because the process of going through the budget cycle, getting something up on the Hill, getting through a process, getting past the CR is about 2 years. I can be 2 years faster if you just let me start. Give me a few $100 million. I don't need a lot in defense budget terms anyway, and we could get going. Right? And it's not a long-term commitment. It's just a commitment to the earlier trade studies and earlier design phases up through, say, preliminary design review. And no commitment beyond that. That's the way we contract today anyway. We basically award full-scale development, or EMD, after preliminary design review. So let me get started and go kind of up to that phase. So that's one thing. The other thing you can do is take more risk. And when we do that and we get programs that get into trouble because they've done that, we get excoriated. I'm happy to do that, but be prepared for the consequences. Now, the way you take more risk is generally you skip a risk reduction phase, you assume that the technology will be mature, and you start right out with design. And in addition to that, you only do the critical things. We have a number of programs that have been very problematic, because what we did was we did a technology demonstrator, and then we built more of them. A good example, I've got Northrop Grumman at the table down here, I think, right somewhere. Global Hawk. We built Global Hawk as a demonstrator and decided we liked it, and we just bought some more. It was a reliability nightmare, and we were paying exorbitant amounts of money to sustain that system. So what did we do? We canceled it. We canceled it in favor of the U-2, a 1950s generation airplane. It makes me sad to look at a 1950s generation airplane on an airfield in Korea. Now, I saw one, I said, my God, we're still flying that thing. It's a great airplane, by the way. But it is 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. So this motivated industry, and Northrop Grumman responded, and they got the reliability of that system up and the cost down. And as a result, we reversed our decision. But we came very close to killing the program because of that. Another example is the EKVs, the kill vehicles that are part of the national missile defense. Again, take risk, get it out there fast, just build them. Reliability, terrible. And now we're redesigning them, and we're going to rebuild them, basically. We had to go to a new program to replace them. In that case, we didn't fix them. We're basically going to replace them. So I can give you other examples like that. A great story to tell is the story of the MRAPs, which everybody regards as a great success. We built about 25,000, 30,000 MRAPs. We're throwing away 25,000 of them, keeping about 5,000 or 6,000. The first MRAPs we built were largely for Iraq. And by the way, this was a good thing to do. Okay, it was, and the point I'm going to make is that there are times when you want to do things quickly, that urgency and risk-taking are absolutely the rule of the day in what you want to do. And there are times when you should be a little bit slower and more deliberate about how you do things to get a better product. So anyway, the first MRAPs we built were designs, a number of them, that took off-the-shelf automotive components, put them together, put a lot of armor on them to protect people, and did some things with a V-shaped hull and so on to deflect blast from IEDs. They worked very well, and they were a very important thing for us to do, saved a lot of lives, helped sustain support for the conflict we were in. We built all of those vehicles, and then we decided to increase our operations in Afghanistan, and we discovered that those vehicles were totally unsuited to the terrain in Afghanistan. And we went and we built several thousand more vehicles, which were a smaller design with more dynamic suspensions. But it had been cheaper for that first bunch of MRAPs and quicker to go with basically leaf ring-based older, more simple suspension systems and a bigger design because we want to put more people in the vehicle. So contrast both of those programs with the JLTV program for the Army, which took quite a long time to be fielded, went through a false start or two, had a competition, had a lot of requirements, did one of those best value competitions that I talked about, where we told industry what we were willing to pay for better capability. And we got, I can't say much about what the bidders did, but they were kind of across the spectrum. We did not pick the cheapest guy. We picked the best product based on value. And now we're well underway with what will be a system that will be in the inventory for 40 years. And we will keep them all. I'm convinced of that. And contrast that with the MRAPs. So there are times when taking your time and getting it right and being sure you have a product that will endure for a long time is the right thing to do. There are other times when paying for the complexity inherent in the program is worth it. Secretary Panetta, the very first meeting I had with him, asked me why we couldn't do more programs like MRAP and why F-35 took so long. And my answer was one word: complexity. It's the complexity of the design, and also I would say the degree to which it's a new design and a cutting-edge design. And if you want to have products for our military, which are a decade at least ahead of anything anybody else will have, you're going to have to do some things which are hard, have never been done before. It's a creative process. And the idea that we can be perfect in our planning for a creative process like that, how many of you work on cars in your lives? Some people, a lot of people old enough that they have done that. It's hard to work on a car anymore. I can tell you from my experience, and I bet many of you will say the same thing, that your estimate for how long it would take you to do a given task, change a fuel pump or something, was the first time you did it was always off by about a factor of 2, right? The second time you did it, you knew how long it would take, all right? When we do a new world-class weapon system for the first time, it's much more like that, okay? We're not very good at predicting how long it takes to do things like that because you just you end up leaving out things that you didn't anticipate. We've been pushed very hard by the Congress to do more fixed price development. I've resisted that. We had an occasion, is Boeing here? Boeing in the room? We had an occasion recently where Boeing had to write off another few $100 million on the Air Force tanker. Boeing has written off $2 billion now on the development for the tanker. And we just started production just recently. The tanker is my poster child example of a fixed price development appropriate program. We were taking a commercial aircraft, doing modifications on it, which we thought were pretty well understood. The requirements were firm. We thought the technology was in hand, not any technical stretch in terms of what the design was going to be. We had somebody doing the job in either company that would have won, that would have been very good at it and had good experience. It was relevant. There were companies that had the resources that if they got in trouble and had to pay money to finish the development job, they could do so. And they also had a business case to continue to do so. But we had all of those things. And still, Boeing overran by $2 billion in development because largely things, sometimes it was what I'll honestly call a mistake. Sometimes it was an unforeseen aspect of the design that they didn't adequately deal with. We can't generally expect industry to take $2 billion losses on development programs, and we want the flexibility to adjust requirements as we need to. We want to have that kind of trusting, cooperative relationship I talked about earlier where people work together. It's a much better environment to work in. And the things we ask industry to do that are going to put us a decade ahead of, or 2 decades ahead of everybody else in the world are hard. They're hard. I mean, I was thinking about all the attempts I've seen to improve acquisition. And I've seen a lot of fads, and none of them have really worked. I've worked very, very hard over the last several years to try to communicate this to people, and I appear to have failed because people still think that there's some magic out there. There isn't. It's hard. And the reason we struggle is the same reason that commercial firms struggle. Commercial firms, by the way, do not do fixed price development. They do cost plus development. It's their own money. They pay the cost as long as it's in their interest to do so, and they stop when it isn't. They don't have to keep going until they've got the product done no matter what. That's not the way it works. And then commercial development you see is the similar types of problems that we see with military products. It's not different. So we shouldn't have unrealistic expectations. If you want us to take risks, and way back to where we started this question, if you want us to take risk, we can, but you have to be prepared for the consequences. If you ask us to take risk, the result will be schedule slips and cost overruns, but you may still get the thing you want faster if you do that. Just be prepared to accept the consequences. You really got me going on that
one. When do you get to a point in a program where something is really old and you're trying to kill it and it just won't die? And take the A-10 if you want for...
I know I'm an A-10 fan. I know there's some A-10 fans in here. I think, by the way, that the Air Force decision was perfectly understandable there. We've gotten a lot of resistance for very understandable reasons, and I think right now where we are right now is we're doing basically what the Congress is insisting that we do. The A-10 is a terrific weapon system. And I chaired the Close Air Support Committee in the Pentagon 20 years ago, was working on things like improvements to the A-10, and also getting the rest of the more multi-role force capable of doing that. I think the Air Force came to a conclusion that it was, with the financial issues that they have, that sustaining that special purpose aircraft when it had a lot of other general purpose aircrafts that were more capable made sense. Interestingly, we're going to be doing a test of the F-35 in a close air support mode, and I was relieved to find that the operational testers won't try to use an F-35 like an A-10. It's not the way to use it. But the A-10, with the degree of protection it has, the 2 engines, the titanium bathtub, and everything else, very powerful gun, can carry a lot of munitions, can stick around for a long time. I don't know any infantryman who doesn't like to see an A-10 show up as his preferred choice, frankly. But we can do close air support a lot of other ways. And when we're talking about a counterinsurgency, which is largely an infantry fight, that capability is really important. If you're talking about a mechanized fight on the plains of Europe against a dynamic, fast-moving force, it's a different situation, right? Particularly one that has great air-to-air capability. The A-10 is not a fighter. It's a close air support aircraft, and it really cannot defend itself against even a fourth-generation fighter. So it's hard to take things out of the inventory. There are communities that are advocates for them. It's hard to get things into the inventory for the same reason, because the different communities want to sustain the thing that they've spent their lives with, basically. I think another thing that the next administration is going to have to try to confront is the difficult choices that we need to make in terms of how we equip and how we structure our forces and how we position ourselves going forward. Because right now, there's enormous tension among all the different interest groups for all the different reasons I said earlier to protect different aspects of what we have. And I don't think we're going to get to where we need to be unless we can find a way to get beyond that, frankly.
You had mentioned earlier, Jim.
Yeah, Mike, right behind you.
You had mentioned earlier that sometimes a ConOps change can be as important as a technological change. Are there elements being put in place to allow for that process to occur?
That's a good question. I think so. I think there's some fairly creative thinking happening in the operational communities. I've had some conversations with the Army and the Navy in particular about this. I think maybe the Air Force is doing the same thing. I mentioned the Russians and what they're doing. I think that's sort of been an eye-opener in the Ukraine. It's a different mode of warfare, ground combat. The other thing I did not mention that is happening is the increased Russian reliance on tactical nuclear weapons. They're kind of going back to offset strategy 1. And that poses some problems for us. I take them at their word when they talk about how they might use nuclear weapons to control escalation. And it's very problematic for us. I think experimentation helps. At the end of the day, and it's very hard to do this when budgets are declining or flat. When budgets are going up, it's a lot easier to invest in new ideas. But when budgets are declining or flat, everybody's protecting, everybody's hanging on to what they got. And the only way, I mentioned the RCOs, we create the new rapid capability offices. Okay, I've got a box and I can assign some people to it, but what I really have to give it if I want it to do anything is some money. And when I talked to the Army yesterday, they had a concept for this organization, which looked reasonable, but they had no resources yet. I said, well, are you going to transfer existing programs into that box? And the answer is, no, we're not going to take them out of the established chain. I said, well, then you're going to do new starts. How are you going to fund those new starts? I think that's really, at the end of the day, going to be the fundamental issue. Same is true for operational innovation. It's a truism that victorious militaries are not good at recognizing the need to change. We've been very, very successful militaries for quite a long time.
As a token of that appreciation, and as a reminder that SENEDIA stands for the same things that you commented on today, is a coin.
Thank you very much.
The SENEDIA
Thank you.
coin.
Thank you.